Mark Twain Selected Works. My First Lie and How I Got Out of It. December 10th, 1899. As I understand it, what you desire is information about my first lie and how I got out of it. I was born in 1835. I am well along, and my memory is not as good as it was. If you had asked about my first truth, it would have been easier for me and kinder of you, for I remember that fairly well. I remember it as if it were last week. The family think it was week before, but that is flattery and probably has a selfish project back of it. When a person has become seasoned by experience and has reached the age of 64, which is the age of discretion, he likes a family compliment as well as ever, but he does not lose his head over it as in the old innocent days. I do not remember my first lie, it is too far back, but I remember my second one very well. I was 9 days old at the time and had noticed that if a pin was sticking in me and I advertised it in the usual fashion, I was lovingly petted and coddled and pitied in a most agreeable way and got a ration between meals besides. It was human nature to want to get these riches, and I fell. I lied about the pin, advertising one when there wasn't any. You would have done it. George Washington did it. Anybody would have done it. During the first half of my life, I never knew a child that was able to rise above that temptation and keep from telling that lie. Up to 1867, all the civilized children that were ever born into the world were liars, including George. Then the safety pin came in and blocked the game. But is that reform worth anything? No, for it is reform by force and has no virtue in it. It merely stops that form of lying. It doesn't impair the disposition to lie by a shade. It is the cradle application of conversion by fire and sword, or of the temperance principle through prohibition. To return to that early lie, they found no pin, and they realized that another liar had been added to the world's supply. For by grace of a rare inspiration, a quite commonplace but seldom noticed fact was borne in upon their understandings, that almost all lies are acts, and speech has no part in them. Then, if they examined a little further, they recognized that all people are liars from the cradle onward, without exception, and that they begin to lie as soon as they wake in the morning, and keep it up without rest or refreshment until they go to sleep at night. If they arrived at that truth, it probably grieved them, did if they had been heedlessly and ignorantly educated by their books and teachers. For why should a person grieve over a thing which by the eternal law of his make he cannot help? He didn't invent the law. It is merely his business to obey it and keep still. Join the universal conspiracy and keep so still that he shall deceive his fellow conspirators into imagining that he doesn't know that the law exists. It is what we all do, we that know. I am speaking of the lie of silent assertion. We can tell it without saying a word, and we all do it, we that know. In the magnitude of its territorial spread, it is one of the most majestic lies that the civilizations make it their sacred and anxious care to guard and watch and propagate. For instance, it would not be possible for a humane and intelligent person to invent a rational excuse for slavery. Yet, you will remember that in the early days of the emancipation agitation in the North, the agitators got but small help or countenance from anyone. Argue and plead and pray as they might, they could not break the universal stillness that reigned, from pulpit and press all the way down to the bottom of society. The clammy stillness created and maintained by the lie of silent assertion. The silent assertion that there wasn't anything going on in which humane and intelligent people were interested. From the beginning of the Dreyfus case to the end of it, all France, except a couple of dozen moral paladins, lay under the smother of the silent assertion lie that no wrong was being done to a persecuted and unoffended man. The like smother was over England lately, a good half of the population silently letting on that they were not aware that Mr. Chamberlain was trying to manufacture a war in South Africa, and was willing to pay fancy prices for the materials. Now there we have instances of three prominent, ostensible civilizations working the silent assertion lie. Could one find other instances in the three countries? I think so. Not so very many, perhaps, but say 1 billion, just so as to keep within bounds. Are those countries working that kind of lie day in and day out in thousands and thousands of varieties without ever resting? Yes, we know that to be true. The universal conspiracy of the silent assertion lie is hard at work always and everywhere, and always in the interest of a stupidity or a sham, never in the interest of a thing fine or Is it the most timid and shabby of all lies? It seems to have the look of it. For ages and ages it has mutely labored in the interest of despotisms and aristocracies and chattel slaveries, and military slaveries and religious slaveries, and has kept them alive. Keeps them alive yet, here and there and yonder, all about the globe. And we'll go on keeping them alive until the silent assertion lie retires from business. The silent assertion that nothing is going on, which fair and intelligent men are aware of, and are engaged by their duty to try to stop. What I am arriving at is this. When whole races and peoples conspire to propagate gigantic mute lies in the interest of tyrannies and shams, why should we care anything about the trifling lies told by individuals? Why should we try to make it appear that abstention from lying is a virtue? Why should we want to beguile ourselves in that way? Why should we without shame help the nation lie, and then be ashamed to do a little lying on our own account? Why shouldn't we be honest and honorable and lie every time we get a chance? That is to say, why shouldn't we be consistent, and either lie all the time or not at all? Why should we help the nation lie the whole day long, and then object to telling one little individual private lie in our own interest to go to bed on? Just for the refreshment of it, I mean, and to take the rancid taste out of our mouth. Here in England they have the oddest ways. They won't tell a spoken lie. Nothing can persuade them, except in a large moral interest like politics or religion, I mean. To tell a spoken lie to get even the poorest little personal advantage out of it is a thing which is impossible to them. They make me ashamed of myself sometimes, they are so bigoted. They will not even tell a lie for the fun of it. They will not tell it when it hasn't even a suggestion of damage or advantage in it for anyone. This has a restraining influence upon me in spite of reason, and I am always getting out of practice. Of course, they tell all sorts of little unspoken lies, just like anybody, but they don't notice it until their attention is called to it. They have got me so that sometimes I never tell a verbal lie now except in a modified form, and even in the modified form they don't approve of it. Still, that is as far as I can go in the interest of the growing friendly relations between the two countries. I must keep some of my self-respect and my health. I can live on a pretty low diet, but I can't get along on no sustenance at all. Of course, there are times when these people have to come out with a spoken lie, for that is the thing which happens to everybody once in a while, and would happen to the angels if they came down here much. Particularly to the angels, in fact, for the lies I speak of are self-sacrificing ones told for a generous object, not a mean one. But even when these people tell a lie of that sort, it seems to scare them and unsettle their minds. It is a wonderful thing to say, and shows that they are all insane. In fact, it is a country which is full of the most interesting superstitions. I have an English friend of 25 years standing, and yesterday, when we were coming downtown on top of the bus, I happened to tell him a lie. A modified one, of course, a half-breed, a mulatto. I can't seem to tell any other kind now, the market is so flat. I was explaining to him how I got out of an embarrassment in Austria last year. I do not know what might have become of me if I hadn't happened to remember to tell the police that I belonged to the same family as the Prince of Wales. That made everything pleasant, and they let me go, and apologized too, and were ever so kind and obliging and polite, and couldn't do too much for me, and explained how the mistake came to be made, and promised to hang the officer that did it, and hoped I would let bygones be bygones, and not say anything about it. And I said they could depend on me. My friend said austerely, "You call it a modified lie? Where is the modification?" I explained that it lay in the form of my statement to the police. I didn't say I belonged to the royal family. I only said I belonged to the same family as the prince, meaning the human family, of course. And if those people had had any penetration, they would have known it. I can't go around furnishing brains to the police. It is not to be expected. How did you feel after that performance? Well, of course I was distressed to find that the police had misunderstood me. But as long as I had not told any lie, I knew there was no occasion to sit up nights and worry about it. My friend struggled with the case for several minutes, turning it over and examining it in his mind. Then he said that, so far as he could see, the modification was itself a lie, it being a misleading reservation of an explanatory fact, and so I had told 2 lies instead of only 1. I wouldn't have done it, said he. I have never told a lie, and I should be very sorry to do such a thing. Just then he lifted his hat and smiled a basketful of surprised and delighted smiles down at a gentleman who was passing in a hansom. Who was that, G? I don't know. Then why did you do that? Because I saw he thought he knew me and was expecting it of me. If I hadn't done it, he would have been hurt. I didn't want to embarrass him before the whole street. Well, your heart was right, G, and your act was right. What you did was kindly and courteous and beautiful. I would have done it myself. But it was a lie. A lie? I didn't say a word. How do you make it out? I know you didn't speak. Still, you said to him very plainly and enthusiastically in dumb show, "Hello, you in town? Awful glad to see you, old fella. When did you get back?" Concealed in your actions was what you have called a misleading reservation of an explanatory fact. The fact that you had never seen him before. You expressed joy in encountering him. A lie. And you made that reservation. Another lie. It was my pair over again. But don't be troubled. We all do it.